I've always been a very, very self-motivated. I graduated in the top 10% of my year at medical school. I'm an academic high flyer, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling this. Why can't I motivate myself? And that then led me to question the career choices I'd made. And ultimately, I decided to leave that training program. I was 3 years into it, have a baby, and become a GP. Yeah.
So while you're creating your content, you're trying to do NHS Clinical Entrepreneur, you're exploring your options, someone found your content online.
Yeah.
Not just someone in Cornwall or Bristol or London, someone wherever, but you found someone who is a software engineer, legit software engineer, working with Google, Google DeepMinds. I don't know anything about Google and all that, but basically, she was founding a company, and she reached out to you based on the content you put out online.
Yes.
And this is how you became a co-founder. Yeah. So, but going out there and doing it, I think it's fantastic, and it's been a great experience. And I tend to think of it this way: you built something, you spent 6 months, you invested in it. The Dr. Claire Ashhley, who started out, it's not possible to be the same person, because you've expanded your mind. You're talking about seed, proceed, venture, raising money, and all that stuff. Is a bit beyond what we're taught in medical school, I think.
Yeah,
So
I'm
what's
excited
next?
too. Yes. Oh, great question. I don't know, but that doesn't mean that I'm not being strategic, and I'm not being very, everything is planned at the moment. So I've got maybe 2 or 3 months of not needing to worry too much about the money that's coming in.
So she went from being burnt out as a mental health tech company. How cool is that? Today on the MONEYWISE Doctor podcast, we're thrilled to welcome a remarkable guest whose journey from burnout to breakout would inspire you. After experiencing burnout from her NHS GP job, she began a new journey, co-founding a mental health tech startup and partnering up with an ex-Silicon Valley AI engineer to start something really special. Now, tune in as she shares her wins, her losses, her blessings, and her lessons. And there's a lot of invaluable insights along the way. Now, in case you're new to the channel and you're wondering what's going on, welcome to MONEYWISE Doctor Podcast, where we share valuable financial insights for doctors, dentists, nurses, and healthcare professionals to help them thrive and take charge of their financial future. If you're new here, dive in straight away, enjoy the video, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. All right, then, let's go. Yeah, so hello everyone. You're welcome back again to MONEYWISE Doctor. Today I've got someone really special in the house. It's usually most of the weeks it's me going on again and again, droning on about how you need to take charge of your finances and giving you a lot of unsolicited financial advice which you pretend is useful and go ahead liking it. Today I've got someone who's got a different angle to things. She's going to share with us her experience. She's a medical doctor, a GP, fully trained GP, with a very good experience and background. But in addition to that, as you know, I usually bring people who have got an interesting aspect to them. She's also been the CEO of a startup company, a software company that focused on therapy using AI. In addition to that, she's run several other things, including growing a brand online as a Burnout GP. This is a subject which she has grown a lot of expertise and has a great following. So if you're ready for her, I'm ready to bring her on stage. I bring to you Dr. Claire Ashhley.
Thank you so much for such a fantastic introduction. I think that's the best one I've ever had on a podcast.
All right. In that case, let's make it a bit better. Now, Claire Ashhley, as you can see, Claire is a GP. She's a GP, NHS GP, but she wears multiple hats, and I'm going to share some of that with you. I think you went to medical school in Bristol, 02 to 08, so she's obviously got over 20 years of experience now in the medical field, and I'll say over 15 as a GP. And while you were there, you got a BSc in neurosciences, which is fantastic and works nicely into what you're doing now with Burnout. In addition, you've also done a postgraduate diploma in public health, which obviously what you're doing is sort of like a public health education as well. And while you've been working as an NHS GP, you formed a company after going through your NHS Clinical Entrepreneurship Training. You started the Atypical medical company. That's quite an interesting name. It seems you provide training and all that. And also, much more recently, you were the co-founder of Bobby Chat, features like an innovative way to use chat and AI to provide therapy at an affordable way. I suspect I've missed quite a few things, but I'm sure you're going to fill us in. Welcome,
Mm.
Claire.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really lovely synopsis of my career so far. But I can certainly talk you through some of the things that I've done and my experiences in a little bit more depth if that's something that you would like me to
Of
do.
course, of
Yeah.
course. Tell me what I've missed.
Yeah, I mean, you've got most of it, to be honest. I mean, I've had a very, very varied career, actually. I certainly have not ended up where I thought I would be when I started medical school back in 2002, which is quite a long time ago now, longer than I care to remember.
Don't mind me, Claire.
So I got into medical school and I went to medical school in Bristol and I intercalated in neuroscience. I loved doing neuroscience and I thought that everything that I learned in that year was absolutely fascinating. And I had a brief kind of idea that I might become a psychiatrist, but actually what I really found that I loved during my training was anaesthetics. I loved doing practical procedures and I loved intensive care. And so I graduated from medical school with a view to becoming an anaesthetist. And that's what I did. I did my foundation year training. I did ACCS anaesthetics. But whilst I was doing that, I started to realize that, at the time I was engaged, we were looking to settle down. I was thinking about having a family. And I didn't really find that I was enjoying doing shift work in hospital. And I also found the emotional toll of working in intensive care in particular was quite difficult. And I was struggling with it more than I thought I would have been, than I anticipated. And I decided that I didn't want to carry on with anaesthetics. I basically started revising for the primary and I suddenly thought, oh my God, I find it very hard to sit down and to revise. And I was like, I've never been in this position before. I've always been a very, very self-motivated. I graduated in the top 10% of my year at medical school. I'm an academic high flyer, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling this. Why can't I motivate myself? And that then led me to question the career choices I'd made. And ultimately, I decided to leave that training program. I was 3 years into it, have a baby and become a GP. Yeah. So I decided to be a GP because really, I wanted out of hospital. I wanted a better work-life balance. And there were lots of things about general practice that appealed to me, particularly the flexibility of general practice and having that control, that autonomy. But mostly I wanted my weekends back. And I wanted to have a family life. And unfortunately, as we both know, general practice doesn't really offer that. It does offer flexibility, certainly, especially if you're locuming or if you've got a portfolio career, which is what I've created. But if you're a salary GP, if you're a partner, it's long days. And it's like being on call every day you're in work, in terms of the intensity of the workload, the complexity, the volume, and the hours that you're doing as well.
Absolutely.
And not very compatible with with childcare, for instance. So I've got 2 kids and the days were so long that I couldn't pick my kids up from school and things like that. And this mattered because my husband quite often works away, so I'm a solo parent.
Yeah.
And then I qualified. I had a lovely training experience in Bristol. I qualified as a GP at the end of 2018 and then went immediately into a health inequalities fellowship, during which I did this public health qualification, which was really interesting. And I ended up working in a surgery where the patient demand was next level. And in fact, they were using a piece of software. And this is not a lie, by the way. I've seen the data. So the software is a piece of software that is used nationally now. And we were the practice. We were an outlier. We were the practice with the highest patient demand in the entire country. And I know this because, the team came to our surgery and showed us the graphs. And we had by far and away the highest patient demand in the country. And unfortunately, I then really started to struggle with managing the workload. This is something that had never been a problem. I hadn't had any mental health problems during medical school, during my postgraduate training, all of this sort of stuff. But it took me 6 short months working in this surgery to completely unravel. And I ended up having a mental health burnout crisis about 6 months after I started that job. And at the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. I had, burnout had never been mentioned, or stress management for that matter, never been mentioned during my time at medical school or in my postgraduate training. I didn't even know it was a name. I didn't know it was a thing.
No.
And what happened after that was I've ended up going on a very kind of convoluted journey of, first of all, trying to make my work for me. So, making sure that I'm working in a way that sustains my recovery and doesn't jeopardize it.
Yes.
And I've ended up creating a very much a portfolio career and going on kind of, it's been more like it's a squiggly career, basically. It's been an evolution. Yeah. An evolution.
Use that word to describe my career, squiggly career.
Yes,
That's very
definitely.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
been sort of like a varied career. You've gone from, first of all, being a medical doctor, you're an academic high flyer.
Mm,
You got a distinction in your BSc, and obviously you graduated top of your
mm,
class. And then you worked on. I didn't know you did that bit. I didn't know you worked in the hospital. You worked on anesthesia, and then
yeah.
you ended up as a GP. But
Yeah.
obviously, you sort of like ended up in this practice and
Mm,
like many practices. I've worked as a salary GP in the past before I went off to work for myself.
mm,
Working as a GP can be quite demanding. Most people don't realize.
yeah.
But you've gone up to do so many things, and I see like a kind of like a trajectory where, or rather, sort of a pattern where you start something, you think this is not working for me, and you've got that self awareness to say, look, I'm not just going to hang in there and just
Mm,
continue to like become an aesthetics consultant, and then I'm going to moan about it and get stuck for the rest of my life. You are
yeah.
willing to sort of like switch roles and then do something else. And obviously, at the point where you are, then you're managing different portfolio, which we talked about in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that sounds interesting.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, interesting is a word. You can definitely describe my career for sure. But basically, yeah, I mean, the reason why it ended up being as squiggly as it was survival, to be honest. I needed my career to work for me because it had so negatively impacted my mental health and mental well-being. The thing about burnout is if you hit a burnout crisis, it's an average of 1 to 3 years to recover. That's what the data tells us. But also, you have to make really significant changes to how you work. And one of the problems with working in the NHS is that the pressures that cause people to burn out are universal and they are
Hmm.
pervasive and they're not getting better.
Yeah.
And what I kind of ended up doing, and it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I was trying to find ways of working that reduced my exposure to those particular stressors that had caused me to end up like this, while still
Yeah.
staying in clinical medicine as I could. And I basically tried a number of different things trying to make it work for me,
Yeah.
and including setting up businesses outside of the NHS as well and working for myself. And I've done some really interesting things as a result of that. As a locum GP during the pandemic, I ended up working in a field hospital outside a hospital that had closed for 2 weeks,
Field
because
hospital.
yeah. So it was literally like built outside the A&E entrance because the hospital was completely closed and they needed GPs to run it. So I volunteered for it, and it was super interesting.
Excellent.
I've done some out of hours GP. I've done in-hours locum. I've worked as a
Yeah.
tutor for medical students. I've done a
Hmm.
fair number of things. But really what kind of my passion was, I
Yeah.
ended up talking about, my burnout experience on social media, largely because I was really lonely, really isolated, very angry that it had happened to me. And I was like, I can't be the only person that this has
Hmm.
happened to. And at that time, 5 years ago, no one on social media was talking about how medicine can be
Uh,
stressful and how it can harm you. And so I got a lot of traction on social media based off the back of that. And the more traction I got, the more I needed to know about the subject. So I did a lot of additional reading. I did a really deep dive into the literature and really educated myself on the
yeah.
evidence base behind effective prevention and recovery of burnout. And I built a very strong presence and personal brand around this particular issue. And then I started to kind of think, I wanted more than what clinical medicine was giving me. I wanted to really make a mark on the world. I wanted to take this huge problem of burnout and try to fix it. And so
Yeah.
I created an evidence-based burnout recovery program that the vision was to take it to the NHS and to get it as a free offering for staff. And
Oh,
as a
wonderful.
result of creating that, I ended up on the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Scheme.
All
And
right.
I joined that this time last year. And I started the scheme, obviously, with this idea, this intention of taking what I'd created to the NHS. But
make it something.
But a couple of things happened very early on that made me that changed the direction of my career. So the first thing was I saw what some of the other entrepreneurs were doing. There's an amazing entrepreneur called Lou. She is a researcher who's created the most incredible AI device that can detect cardiovascular disease 10, 15 years before you get any symptoms.
Oh, wow.
And I saw her pitch and my jaw was on the floor and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I've come here with a PowerPoint presentation. I was like, wow. I'm with the big boys now. I've got to do better.
I love it. Look at the way I look at it. I think you've come to a gunfight with a knife.
Yeah.
Can't count the number of times that's happened to me. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing. I think that was about the time we became friends on LinkedIn. I think you made a post about the NHS entrepreneur stuff. You went to London, and I said, "Oh yeah, it's too far from here. I live in Cornwall. I don't care about making trips to London." And then you said, "I live in the West Country also." And I live in Bristol.
Yes, okay. That's right.
Tell me more about NHS, your experience going to the NHS Entrepreneurship Program.
So that was the first thing that happened to me. I was like, my God, I've got to like really think outside the box here and think bigger than what I had already created. And then the second thing was I went to the first event, which was held in London. Yes, I went all the way from Bristol.
Yeah.
And the room was full. I mean, there were 100 plus people in the room. The energy was incredible. And I just had this moment where I was sat there and I thought, this is the biggest opportunity I've had in my career, hands down. And it has come at exactly the right time. Like I was recovered enough to make the most of it. And I just made a promise on that first day. I was like, if I don't push myself, I will regret it forever. And so I made myself do a couple of scary things on that day. I asked a question of one of the speakers, which doesn't sound scary actually, but I was shaking. I was so nervous and I couldn't write down the answer to the question because my hands were shaking so much.
Do you remember the question?
Yes, I think I asked. So this was an investor who works a lot with the government and runs like the Barclays Eagle Labs program. So they help entrepreneurs and it's all government funded and all this. He was talking about the lean startup and having a startup basically. And the question I asked was, how do you build the right team and what skills do you need? And then there are three types of people that you need in your startup to make it a success, basically with different skill sets. And there are different names for them. So one of them is like the hipster. There are two other names as well. I can't remember the answer, but I remember the question. Probably because I was shaking too much to write the answer.
I think what matters, remembering the question you asked is cool. Remembering the answer is also great. But what matters is that you actually ask the question, because sometimes it doesn't really matter whatever it is you asked about. But that actually having that courage to really stand out in a room, especially as doctors, we are taught to just sort of like just go ahead with it. There's no need to stand out. You don't want to be. Yeah, that's an interesting journey.
Yes, and I did another thing as well. I went up to the professor that heads the program and had a chat with him as well, and I came away feeling that it was a real confidence boost. Basically, I was like, I've done something really scary today, and it felt good, and I was like, I want a bit more of this. I like how this feels, especially after such a long period of going through. I was severely depressed at the height of my burnout. I didn't feel joy or motivation for a long time, even though I was still working during this. I didn't take any time off actually, which was a mistake. And it took a very, very long time for me to get back to feeling well emotionally, but my confidence was the very last thing to come back, and this thing accelerated that. And then off the back of it, because I was like, right, I've got to make the most of this opportunity. I can't just sit here and do and be small. I have to think big.
So once you're beyond your PowerPoint, something a bit more.
Yes, beyond the PowerPoint. And so I was talking, I knew I wanted to be in the mental health space, and I wanted to be an advocate for other people that were experiencing the sort of problem that I had. And off the back of me being very loud and noisy about this, primarily on social media, I was approached by the person that went on to become my co-founder. So she was formerly of Google DeepMind. She was a research scientist. Her background was generative AI and large language models. And she was creating something that, so she basically the aim of what she was creating was to make talking therapies more accessible using this very deep and personalized model of AI that she had created.
I was going to jump in there, Claire.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it a bit casually. I didn't want the listeners to miss this bit. So
Okay.
basically, you were creating content about burnout based on your experience. You've made some really amazing videos, and I know one of them hit over 1 million, obviously, after you started your Bobby chat. So while you're creating your content, you're trying to do NHS Clinical Entrepreneur, you're exploring your options, someone found your content online.
Yeah.
Not just someone in Cornwall or Bristol or London, someone wherever, but you found someone who is a software engineer, legit software engineer, working with Google, Google DeepMinds. I don't know anything about Google and all that, but basically, she was founding a company, and she reached out to you based on the content you put out online.
Yes.
And this is how you became a co-founder.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Tell me a bit about that meeting. That sounds really interesting. I didn't want the listeners to miss that bit, because you've mentioned it in a very humble and very, very, very casual way. Tell me, I want to know a bit about that meeting, because basically you are approached by a startup founder, basically to ask for your ideas, and then that's how you go on the team.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So she, I think she sent me a message on LinkedIn. She'd found my Facebook group, and then she messaged me on LinkedIn asking for some advice, basically. And I was really intrigued by the message that she sent me about what she was creating. And we started having this call, and she was asking me a few questions about burnout. And she was very keen to create a product at that time, focused on prevention of burnout, basically, and stress management. And about halfway through this call, I had this realization that what we were planning to do, I was looking for a tech solution to burnout at this point.
Yeah.
And I suddenly was like, she's the one. I was like, I have to work with her. And I thought that what we could do together could be incredible. And about halfway through the call, I just said to her, are you looking for a co-founder? Because I'd like to be it. Which, Andy, honestly, is really not my character. But I just was like, I've got to go for it. I was taking that thing that I've had from the NHS. Yes, that boldness, and going, don't ask, you don't get. I think she's a little bit taken aback.
Yeah.
I think she's a bit like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But actually, she was open to it. She was looking for a co-founder. She'd already spoken to a few other people and hadn't really clicked or got on with them, or they weren't aligned with the missions and the values of the company. And so we worked on a few projects together. We started kind of building out the MVP, the minimum viable product, a little bit more, and we worked well together. And we did then agree to go on and co-found, which was really cool, and not what I was expecting, but I really recognized it as a unique opportunity. I'm not technical, so most startups are technical, particularly when it comes to getting investment and all of this sort of stuff. That's not something I can offer with the skill set I have.
Yes, so I say you're not technical, as in you don't write code and all that, but you've got some technical expertise. You're an expert in the burnout area. It's just like, for instance, MONEYWISE.com. I started it based on my own experience of investing and financial. I didn't have to go to become an accountant or anything like that, but based on practical experience, that's part of why it resonated. So you're an expert in burnout yourself, because you've experienced it, you've written a lot about it. I didn't even realize there were stages of burnout, and I've been to medical school, I've worked in psych and all. I didn't realize that. So while we say this thing, and doctors most times will think, well, we can't write code, we might not be able to raise money. But leveraging on your brand, your technical expertise at that point was that this is a subject you understood, you build a brand along that line. If someone were to ask me about a burnout GP, I knew it was clear, Ashhley. And that in itself is a technical expertise. So, but I understand your point about not being able to write code or go to Silicon Valley to raise money, but we clearly had a lot to offer to that.
Yes. And actually our team was really good, because she brought all of her technical knowledge, which actually was very, very niche and expert. Very few people can do what she can do globally. But also, I guess, from my personal branding point of view, my niche and my expertise, again, there's not many people that do it and have the level of experience and knowledge that I have. So we were a very, very unique team, and we had a lot of strengths. That's how it all started.
That's amazing. Sometimes I tend to put out content online, and someone sent me a message, someone who had worked with me on my team in the past, and said, you might need to start selling something, or people might think you're an NGO, a charity that are following. And I thought about it. I thought, well, I put out content not for small bucket opportunities where I can sell a course. It would be nice if I were to get like a co-founder, someone who was building out software in sort of financial software that people could use. So what you described to me is like a dream scenario where
Mm,
you get someone who you can actually go for something big,
yeah,
and I tend to think about it as a big swing. If it works out, it's going to be fantastic. If it doesn't work out, you're going to have a great story. Either
yeah,
way, it's a fantastic experience. And I'm quite impressed at how you started off first by you've come out from your burnout experience. Then you go to this event where there's a lot of bright people obviously in the room. You felt, well, I've come with a PowerPoint presentation when people are coming with software, but that's not going to stop me. I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to talk to whoever. I think that was, is that Tony? Is that his name? Tony, who was
yeah. It was
yeah,
Tony with an I is a woman,
yeah, Tony
Antonia.
Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Tony Cresswell, your co-founder. I meant
Oh,
Professor
oh,
Young or
yes,
something.
yeah. The Tony
Yeah,
Young. Yep, that's right.
yeah. So that was quite like a big bold step leading to another big bold step. And you saw an opportunity, you went for it. You were like thinking, oh, I'm just going to. Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to work in this startup because you hadn't worked in startup world before. That
Mm,
was your first time.
yes, yeah.
Excellent. So, what was it like working in this startup? Obviously, startup is crazy. How do you make it work with your job? Did you have to quit your job? What did you have to do for money? How
Yeah.
did you raise any financing? What are some of the crazy experiences or things you thought like you never knew about startups? You thought it was glamorous, I'm sure. And what was
Oh,
your experience?
not glamorous at all. Yeah, so there's two questions there, isn't it? The first one is about the company and how that was run and how we funded that. And then the second one is about how I funded it on a personal level, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's talk about let's do the company first, and then I'll talk about how we did it personally. So the
Okay.
process was we started doing a few little projects together and building out the MVP. And then because we were
Mm.
having conversations with investors and because there were a couple where we came very, very close to getting investment, we had to formalize the arrangement. And so
Yeah.
we did all of that paperwork and then
Top table and all of
cap
that.
table, yeah, exactly, and all of the legal stuff, which honestly, like, thing about being a co-founder is that you have to be able to get stuck into every aspect of the business, particularly when there's only two of you. So you have to
Yeah.
do everything right from product development, customer validation, getting your product market fit, doing the
Wow.
go-to-market strategy. You also
Yeah.
have to do accounting, legals,
Yeah.
all of the boring
Everything.
stuff that you don't want to
Everything.
do. You have to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
And there aren't enough hours in the day to do all of it.
No.
But the way that we, generally speaking, we ran it was we very much took the principles of the Lean Startup, which is a
Yep.
book and a methodology about setting up a startup business, where you go through this cycle where you basically build a little bit, get customer feedback, validate it, make improvements, then you go back and you get
And
the
then
feedback, make
apply it
improvements,
again.
exactly, yeah, until you
Yeah.
get that product market fit and you move quickly. So
Yes.
we moved very fast, very much had that kind of Silicon Valley tech startup
Like,
vibe,
yeah.
where
Acceleration.
everything had to be at a pace and decisions were made very quickly. And so, I mean, the bit that I enjoyed the most was building out the product. So the way that it worked
Yeah.
was we'd role play scenarios or skills that we wanted to teach people using the AI.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
then Tony would go away and she'd do some coding, bring it back, and then we'd go through it again and troubleshoot it. And then she'd go back, do a bit more coding, then we'd troubleshoot. And that was really good fun. I really enjoyed applying my clinical skills and my lived experience in that way.
Exactly. That was
Yeah.
where your technical expertise comes in because there's some
Yeah.
nuances that are not going to be obvious to someone writing
Yeah.
code. Yeah.
And the other big responsibility I had that actually was my sole responsibility, really, because I couldn't do the coding, was building, building an audience and getting
Yeah.
testers on board, building
The
strategic
market.
relationships. Yeah, exactly. Like having conversations with potential collaborators, partners, all of
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And actually, I really enjoyed that. And I was very, very good and very successful at building the brand and getting people
Yes.
to the app. Now, the way that this was funded was, unfortunately, we were not successful at getting pre-seed funding. So we were
Funding.
trying to raise,
Yeah.
we were trying to raise a pre-seed round. And there were several reasons why we were not successful. The primary one being that the market is bleak right now. And
Sorry to jump in. How much are you trying to raise?
Well, we started off asking for 1.5 to 2 million. And then as we ended up having conversations with investors, that amount got less and less because we realized that the market was very, very difficult.
It was quite tight, yeah.
Very tight.
I'll tell you something. I'll confess to something, Craig. So while this was starting off, I sent a message to you, and I sent a message to your co-founder, Tanya. And I was thinking in my mind, because I've done a bit of startup, like little startup investing. Most of my investing has been in stock market companies that have been established. I'm only a fundamental investor where I look at numbers and I look at your track record, look at earnings. So, but I sometimes do prospective startup investing, and I thought, this might be a good company to invest in, but I don't think I have deep enough pockets. I'm sure they're probably getting funding. I felt in my mind that you're probably being rushed off your feet with funding, people trying to give you money. And this is the problem with a startup, right? When you're starting up, you're thinking, people looking at you think, well, you've got all you need, and you have to tell that story. Like, you're building something successful, but at the same time, you need all the help you can get. You need the funding, you need the collaborators, you need servers, you need software, you need engineers and all that. But a lot of times, you're working with very limited resources. So 1.5 million, that doesn't seem like a crazy amount. I can't remember what Uber's pre-seed round, Uber and Facebook. I know they had a pre-seed round. That wasn't that mad. Some of them were raising about 250 or there, but you probably know this thing better than me.
Yes, I did personally feel it was too much of an ask.
The 1.5, right?
The 1.5, but having come from Google DeepMind, my co-founder was very confident that we would be able to raise that level of funding, but it became very apparent quite quickly that that was not going to be possible.
Can I just ask a question again, just because I'm interested in startups and every now and then. When you're trying to raise 1.5 million, how much of the company were you going to give away for 1.5 million?
Well, we didn't get to that point, unfortunately. I mean, I think for pre-seed, you would normally aim at around kind of 10%. That's my understanding anyway.
Because you're going to raise more rounds, so you're going to raise the seed, you're going to raise venture at some point.
Exactly.
Wow, so it's quite difficult to raise money. I think it's because of the environment, isn't it? The current environment where the people are holding their purse strings, they're a bit more tighter.
Yes.
But if it was during any other time when everyone was building out everything and investors were throwing money at startups, I suspect you might have been able to raise the money.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I can look back and I can see where we made mistakes, We were able to get some angel investments. So we had 3 angels on board, which was really great. But we weren't able to get the bigger rounds. And unfortunately, because the company was a tech company, the expenses were high and we needed expensive people to help us build out this product and we just couldn't afford it. And we eventually, unfortunately, got to the end of 2023 and decided to call it a day at that point. Because we weren't able to bootstrap it. So bootstrapping is, obviously when you build it organically, but the company wasn't set up to be able to do that, unfortunately. So it was a sad decision, and obviously been on like this wild ride of building something very quickly and being wholly invested in it from an emotional point of view, not just from a financial point of view, but the passion that we had and the mission, I absolutely 100% bought into it, and I cared a lot. So it was definitely hard when when we made the decision to stop it, but it was the right decision.
I was very sad. I was very sad when you sort of mentioned that you had to stop it and when you posted online. Well, I'm sure you guys made the right decisions, but I feel like I really admire what you've done and what you've done as a team. Because it's easy to sit on the couch and talk about these things, but from my experience building anything at all, most people underestimate the amount of sacrifice and investment they have to put into it. And there's something you haven't mentioned. I know you mentioned the financing of the company. You were successful. The product you were building, people wanted it. You made videos that hit millions. But the thing is that you needed money to scale, which is part of what most people don't realize. When you're building stuff, the money is just as important because as you're scaling, you're needing more money. You're needing more money for servers. You're needing more money for software engineers. At some point, you're going to need people to deal with customer care and all that. Till you get to the point where you either get bought or you get like venture, or you can take secondaries to take money off the table, or you get to the point where sometimes people go public. Yeah. So, but going out there and doing it, I think it's fantastic and it's been a great experience. And I tend to think of it this way: you built something, you spent 6 months, you invested in it. The Dr. Claire Ashley, who started out, it's not possible to be the same person because you've expanded your mind. You're talking about seed, proceed, venture, raising money, and all that stuff. It's a bit beyond what we're taught in medical school, I think.
Yeah, I agree very much. It was an entirely different world to anything that I had ever been exposed to previously, and it's a very steep learning curve because when you're in it, you just have to get on with it and learn as you go. I think with medics, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, is the way that we learn is that you study something and then you might do it under supervision, and then you have to sit some exams and prove yourself, and then get signed off as being competent to do something before you go out and do it. But in startups, that doesn't work. You just have to get your hands dirty. And sometimes it does really mean stepping out of your comfort zone, but you learn as you go. And it gave me so much confidence that I could work in that way, and really helped me to unlearn some of the habits that I got into as a medic, particularly now thinking about, what do I do next? Those skills are now, is going to be invaluable for me moving forward, 100%.
Absolutely. Move fast and break things. I think that was the motto of Facebook, and that's what you guys were doing. Move fast and break things. I'll think about it now that you brought up that aspect. As medics, I think part of your experience, you've been a doctor, you were like a real committed medical student, then a doctor, and then a GP, then you went up this pathway. For myself, they're a little bit different. I started as an investor, then I built my first business and my second business on campus. So I'd always like been ready to try out stuff and take breaks from medicine and come back. I think, well, I can replace my income. But you've sort of hit something really important that we discussed in the past. Your audience, and obviously lots of people in my audience, they're worried, they want to try out stuff, they want to go out for 6 months and do stuff, but they're thinking about, first of all, in medicine, you don't want to make a mistake. You're not trained to make mistakes because people can die. In startups, you make mistakes. That's how you grow. You make mistakes, you learn stuff. If you're not making enough mistakes, you're going to die. You have to try things. And secondly, you talked about financing. So in medicine, you have a secure income as a doctor, you have a secure income as a healthcare professional, but in startup, that's the part we're going to get into. You didn't have a salary. You obviously, from what you described, you're working at this thing at with breakneck speed. So there was no funding, there was no salary, and you weren't definitely working on your medical job at that point. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when we started working together, I was still doing out of hours primarily. And I was working for the University of Bristol as well. So I was teaching medical students. Then we decided to go all in. So I didn't, from the autumn of 2023, I didn't do any clinical work. Luckily, and you'll understand this as well, I got enough to get myself signed off for my appraisal because that's really important. But we had the financial flexibility between myself and my husband to be able to afford for me to do that. But obviously we were expecting to get funding, at which point I would have been able to take a salary. So I very much kind of went into it thinking, oh, this will only be like 2 or 3 months of not taking any money, and actually it didn't turn out to be like that at all. So it was, it's been quite tough from a personal point of view to see like my savings basically take a massive hit. Yes. But the good thing is that, being a locum GP is, you can pick up shifts. I mean, it's harder now with the ARRS scheme to pick up locum work, but you can still get shifts, and
Absolutely.
decent paid.
You can do stuff. And you've got some other skills as well, which we're going to go into. You've got some other skills and things that you can actually, because a lot of times I see doctors, they're hoping to get like a clear plan before they go, but your experience in the startup world has taught you how to go first. Just figure out one or two things and then go. So part of it is like you haven't got like a clear financial plan or income, but you know that well, you've got skills, you can pick up shit here as a local doctor, you get an income. You do this social media branding as well, which was really helpful. The last time we talked, you showed me something I wasn't thinking about. That there's a lot of stock photos on my website, so I'm the picture I'm replacing it with my own photos. And then you also obviously deliver teaching to corporate settings. So if you're a company owner, you've got a business, you're listening to this, especially I've got some people in my audience that are doctors who've got businesses. reach out to Claire Ashley on LinkedIn. She can come to talk to your staff about burnout and all that. She's really good. You can look at her free stuff first. You find out that she's a subject matter expert. Right. So you've got all these things you're doing. Let's get back to before you took that 2 to 3 months break. Obviously, you had some savings because I come across a scary number of doctors who are living the high life and they haven't got savings. They all assume that they're going to be able to have an income. Part
Yeah.
of why you're able to leave your job and work on this for 6 months, part of why I was able to launch MONEYWISE Doctor.com, and we've gotten to 1 year. So this is 1 year last week. Part of why we're able to do that, and now the
Happy
1 year anniversary now.
birthday!
Part of why we're able to do that, I think we should have like a drum roll or something for 1 year anniversary.
Yeah. Birthday cake.
Part of doing all that was because we had some, and I like how you elegantly put it, financial flexibility.
Yeah.
Part of that is that you had some money in savings. You either you cut down on your expenses or you increase your income or you had savings. That's what helped you to go for it. And I think if you look back, maybe 20 years back, if you didn't take that opportunity, I suspect you might have regretted it, irrespective of how it turned out. So
Yeah.
how did you get to that point where you're able to have that financial buffer to be able to go for it?
Yeah. So part of the reason why we were able to do it is because it was a conscious decision that my husband and I had made some years previously that was completely unrelated to the startup and me having a different career direction. But basically, the slight, I don't want to talk about this too much because it's a long story. But basically, my husband and I, we've been together nearly 20 years. When we got
All
together,
right.
I was a medical student. He had a job that was not very well paid, to be honest with you. And then he decided to retrain. And so then I started working as a doctor and I supported him through that period that took years to retrain. And then when he started working, his income is very much feast or famine. And at the start of his career, he'd go long periods without earning. And so the way that we set up our finances was that we were only ever dependent on one income. So we spent like we were a single income household rather than a dual income household. And what that means is it's hard, especially now. But what that means is we haven't got an unaffordable mortgage. We don't have the top of the range cars, but that's okay. We don't have super fancy holidays. Like occasionally we'll splurge, but mostly we stay in the UK and we go camping and all of this sort of stuff. So we don't live a very extravagant life. And as a result of that, since the pandemic ended, his career has really taken off and he's now the one that is having the regular income. And so because we set up our finances to basically be dependent on one person only, we could afford for me to take a step back. So there was that.
Amazing, Claire. It's fantastic. I mean, I never thought about that. Sort of assume you have one income, depend on one income, and whatever it is, as long as there's that understanding, it goes as surplus, and that gives you that margin that you can play with.
My dad told me when I was younger that I must always have 6 months worth of savings in my bank account. And he was like, don't even think about investing in anything or doing anything else unless you've got those 6 months. And I really took that to heart. And so I locumed loads, I scrimped and I saved to get that money in the bank so that we had that buffer as well. So, but this took place over years before we got to this point. So it was done in like 6 months. This was done over like 20 years, basically. So it took a long time.
I mean, sorry, Claire, you mentioned your dad. I don't hear too many people say my dad told me to keep 6 months or whatever. I think that might be. Was your dad like a banker or an entrepreneur, an investor? Or was he?
No.
It might not have been a doctor, but it was MONEYWISE.
No, my dad, he was in the military and then he was a commercial airline pilot. He's only just retired. Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent advice. I'll tell you something. When we did our video shots about an emergency fund, we had so much engagement on it. And I was thinking, surely it can't be the first time people are hearing about this thing. But believe it or not, you've been to medical school. I've been to medical school. You've done more trainings after medical school. I've done more trainings, masters and all that. No one ever really teaches you as a doctor. These are basic principles, but an emergency fund, savings, cut your coat according to, what's the English saying? They cut your coat according to your size or something. English is only my third language. But basically, like, just go for what you can afford.
Yeah.
Just having those basic principles, I think that's what has given you the opportunity to have this sort of like amazing experience, which I
Mm.
think, in my perspective, I think is an investment. I've had businesses in the past that didn't do well. I had businesses that I thought was just something that was going to be fine for a few months, and then it turned out to be really, really financially rewarding. And
Yeah.
most of the time, it turns out that the experience you get from one ends up in the other one, and is helpful. So this is
Mm.
amazing. You had an emergency fund. You were keeping your. I'm drawing out the lessons. You had an emergency fund, 6 months
Mhm.
worth of expenses.
Yeah.
So this is really quite key for the audience. 6 months worth of expenses. You didn't have a fancy car. Obviously, if you make several hundred millions and you wanted to buy the newest Tesla or Lamborghini, of course, go for it. But you ain't going crazy on a car because you knew that as long as your car works. You know, I've been doing a bit of traveling. Last week I was outside the country. This
Mm.
week I was in London. As long as my car can get me to the airport and all that, and I don't need to have the newest one. It's still a nice car. You had a mortgage, but it wasn't something crazy. But all this part of it was because you had to depend on one income, but you also had the right money mindset to give you that runway because you had like 6 months runway.
Yes.
That's
And
amazing.
that's the process that we did. Basically, was worked out how long I could take off with the money that was coming in and what we had in the bank, and without 100, even with that buffer there, we have pulled back on a lot of things. Holidays, days out, eating out, all of that sort of
Mm,
stuff. We
mm,
have definitely been more careful about that over this time
yeah,
period, and it does make me nervous not having as much of a buffer, if I'm being totally
buffer, yeah,
honest.
yeah,
But what I have learned and gained out of the last 6 months will hopefully put me in a much better position going forward to make more money in the
absolutely,
long run, and that's
absolutely.
really exciting. So I'm glad that I did it. I wanted actually one of the things I'm thinking about is founding again, but I can't afford it right now. So I need to go make some bank,
Okay.
get myself into a better position financially, and then I can think about going again. So it's not all straightforward, and it still does keep me up at night. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think money does keep a lot of people up at night, doesn't it? But
Yeah,
we're
absolutely. I
in a
mean, most time
yeah,
people think about it from the point of they think it's easy, but you have to figure out things as you go and all that.
yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing so honestly and being so open about it because lots of time people make it look like it's all rosy, but it's
Mm,
not all rosy as we know. A lot of times you have to
no.
work at things and keep things up.
Yeah. I think as well, just to add to that, I think that what was I gonna say? Sorry, it's fallen out of my head.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the cost of living crisis, I think it means that people need to upskill themselves on financial literacy. It's even
Absolutely.
more of a hair on fire problem than it ever has been, and especially for medics, because our salaries have kind of proportionally decreased over the past few years,
Absolutely.
and there hasn't
Absolutely.
followed inflation. Like, that gap has
No.
dropped. We're not, yes, we're above average earners, but we're not where we used to be in society. And so I think there's a couple of things there. First of all, like, you do need to be educated on how to manage your finances so that you can make it work on a medic salary, right? The second thing,
Absolutely.
yeah, the second thing I've learned is you can't achieve financial freedom. For me, that means retiring early. You can't achieve that on a medic salary these days. Even though the NHS pension is very,
Difficult.
very good, you can't afford to
Yeah.
retire early. So if you want financial freedom, you've got to think outside the box. You've got to either found a startup or have a business or a side hustle or have investments outside of it. And also, you need to work out your appetite for risk and uncertainty as well. Like, I'm quite happy sitting with risk,
Yeah.
but for some people, that's not going to be the right thing for them. And so you've got to do what works for you and your particular
Absolutely.
situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's very useful nuggets. That's come out of the blue, but that's really fantastic money-wise stuff.
Yeah.
One, medics, our income has fallen. A lot of medics, if you're working a salary job, because of what we do, because of what I do at MoneyWise Doctor, we come across doctors who are trying to invest money, they're trying to get their money right, but we also come across a lot of people who have fallen on hard times
Yeah.
and they're really quite struggling. And at some point, we are speaking to a charity that helps doctors to see if we might be able to support them. But what you said is actually really true, and it's quite crucial now. Much more than ever, doctors need to start understanding how money works. Do I take that credit card? I have a business credit card being offered to me that is 101%. charge on the credit card. I'm thinking it's mine because I could get air miles, but I also have to make sure that I'm paying off this stuff. I
Yeah.
don't have to, I pay it up in full. Understanding things like getting better mortgage, not just getting the biggest mortgage you can get, understanding how you can invest your money. Because, like you said, nobody can really retire early on just salary. You've got to invest, you've got to either start a business or invest in a business or have a side hustle. Or even if you can, I've seen people who have just continued investing consistently over 20 years. They have a plan and they just
Mm.
kept investing till they got to, till they got to that number. But that's really very useful, powerful nuggets. Thank you for sharing those, Claire. Yeah. So your journey has been quite a wild ride from being a doctor to burnout expert. And yeah, there's this thing about social media you've been doing. I see like you mentioned on your wall that you could help doctors or whoever was interested in building their social media brand. This is something you've done quite well yourself. After I saw your video hit 1 million on TikTok, I thought maybe I might finally get on TikTok, but I can't twerk or dance or do anything. But Claire is not dancing, she's not twerking, she's just talking calmly about burnout. Yeah, so I started thinking, oh, maybe I could get on TikTok. Not quite there yet, but I might get there. Tell me a bit about your social media experience, how you got into all of it, how
Yeah.
your strategy for getting it all done.
So when I first started talking about burnout on social media, there was no strategy, there was no plan, there was no goal. I was just really angry. And
Yeah.
I had spent so long kind of not being truthful to myself and talking about the problems I was experiencing as a doctor because I was so worried that it might have implications for me in my career. And
Mm.
I'd gone past that point when I started talking about
Yeah.
this on social media because I was like, I don't care what happens actually, because this job has actively harmed me. And now I don't care. And that's a very liberating place to be.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I started putting stuff out on social media and I grew my I got a lot of people joining my audience. And then I decided that I wanted to, once I had, kind of a really nice community, that I wanted to try to use the expertise that I got off the back of that to try to start making some money. So I've already explained how I created this burnout recovery plan. I also supported a few people with like coaching and mentoring who had experienced burnout. And then with having created that really effective personal brand, if you'd seen, over the past year, if you've seen me on LinkedIn, I have repeatedly talked about the same things over and over.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very consistent with my messaging, my tone, my voice, putting out stuff there that is in alignment with my values, and also talking to camera because that makes a difference as well. So people feel like they connect with you as a person. And acting the same in every single situation. So what you see of me online is exactly what you get in person as well. Although I might be a little bit more sweary in real life than I am online.
Well, you're being very authentic, and I think people can see authenticity. It always shines through.
Yes,
Say that
authenticity. Yes, that's the word.
we want a
Yeah,
bit of the sweary Claire. Maybe you might get a bit of the sweary Claire.
maybe. So I built up this brand, and it's brought me opportunities. I have had some incredible opportunities come my way. I was interviewed by the Lancet, for instance, for their 200-year anniversary edition, talking about mental health. They filmed me. It was incredible. I can technically say I've been in the Lancet, like peak medicine goals achieved, right?
Wow, without having to write a paper.
No, exactly. Yeah, thank God. I'm a GP. We don't do that. And then the end of last year, I was featured in Lab Bible. It's got me in front of some really it's open doors.
Bible?
Yes, Lab Bible. It's pretty cool. And
I didn't know all of this. That is amazing. Lab Bible is quite huge.
Yeah, I didn't even know that they picked it up. One of the school mums texted me and she was like, Claire, is this you? It looks a little bit like you. And I was like, oh my God, yes, that is me, number one. And secondly, I was like, I really wish I'd put on a bit of makeup before I did that video because I look terrible. But it's
Lab Bible. We don't mind.
But obviously that sort of stuff doesn't pay the bills, does it? But what it has done is it's allowed me, particularly with Bobby Chat coming to an end and now thinking about what I'm going to do with my career, it's opened a lot of doors. So I'm now getting freelance work. I'm doing a lot of corporate work, webinars, in-person presentations, all of this sort of stuff based on my burnout experience and niche. And I've also got a couple of other opportunities, content creation and all of this sort of stuff that has come off of the back of building this personal brand. And it's also really helped. Yeah, it's also really helped because I am I still haven't decided if I'm going to take a job with a health tech company at the moment. The market is very difficult, and I'm getting enough paid work at the moment to not need. I don't need a job right now. We'll see what happens. I can be flexible. Yeah, I can wait for the right opportunity to come up and see whether or not I take it. But again, it's about your network, and what my personal branding and my use of social media has done is allowed me to get meetings with the right people and to find out what's out there. And also because I'm known for what I do and my niche, and because people feel like they know me and they connect with me already, it's done half the work for me already. I'm getting those meetings really easily because people know who I am. And then thirdly, there's one other thing as well, which is I'm now talking about the fact that I'm transitioning out of clinical medicine, and people are going crazy for it. Like, my audience, especially on Instagram, is so invested into this, and I'm bringing them on this journey with me. And that also is creating more opportunities. So the thing about social media is if you use it in the right way, it can be an incredible force for career opportunities for you. When it's done in the wrong way, it could potentially be harmful and it's very stressful. Yes, like it can become consuming. I do periodically have breaks off of social media. I've had extended breaks. I've had shorter breaks as well. It's really important that if you are thinking about building a personal brand, that you do it in a way that is healthy for you, it's sustainable, and that you are sharing. Obviously, being doctors, we have to think about what we share on social media anyway, because the GMC is we have to
license.
Yes, we've got a license to practice. We have to put ourselves away. Not put ourselves away. We have to conduct ourselves in a certain way. That
does not bring disrepute to the profession.
Yes, we cannot bring the profession into disrepute. Absolutely. So you have to fit those guidelines, but you can still show personality. You can still be yourself. What I found helpful was working out what the main things are that I talk about, and then talking about them consistently and cementing
focus
myself.
On that niche, and you just go ahead and focus on that niche. Absolutely.
Don't be too scattergun.
I don't do very much on Instagram and everywhere else, but I talk in some doctor groups where any post I make get like 100, 200 groups, like closed doctor groups. But then I don't put out very much on my general Facebook, because I've got like people from my high school who are not very interested in what I'm doing, and maybe they might like my picture when I've done the cool stuff. But so knowing where your audience is and going there. And recently I've started writing on LinkedIn as well. I think a few months ago I decided that I'll show up at least every week on LinkedIn to write, and there's also a different audience there. It's understanding the tone. So I think you've done really quite well, and obviously your brand has opened the doors. There's a saying about, if I see you on different platforms and I hear what you're saying 7 times, or if I spend a number of hours with you, I feel like I already know you. I know your message. I know what you say. So that way you're not introducing yourself again. I don't know how much more time you've got. I was going to ask you about a typical medical company, and I was going to ask you
I've got time.
a few things.
Yeah,
okay, good. Let's go for it.
I was going to say, I've got about... Company. Yeah, I've got about 15 minutes, Andy. So, that's fine.
15 minutes is great. That's just about enough to go into a typical medical company and tell us your next steps, what you're going to do. And you've given us sort of like a mini masterclass on how a doctor can build a brand on social media. That's what you did. I suspect we might have another opportunity to unpack it in a bit more detail along the line. But today, I just want to know a bit more about the Atypical company. You founded it, was that last 2 years, 2022?
Yeah, I don't remember when I founded it. I think I founded it when I was thinking about like creating a business around burnout, and I called it the Atypical Medical because I felt like I was doing something.
It's quite a name.
Yes, for medics, like medics understand it, they get it, because I'm doing something that is off the beaten track. It's not going the usual way. You know, it's a squiggly career. It's doing something. It's doing things in a different way, presenting in a different way to the norm, and all of that sort of stuff. So that's how I ended up naming it what it was. The company kind of got a bit abandoned when I did Bobby Chat, and obviously I haven't been successful in getting my burnout program into the NHS, although actually I do have a couple of ways that it might get into some other offerings, but I was hoping to kind of use that company to kind of to be the company that brought the burnout education to the masses and support to the masses. But what it is primarily used for now is, again, there is still some burnout stuff. So all of the corporate stuff goes through that company.
Yeah.
I also had a subscription box business, an e-commerce business that went through that, which I stopped to concentrate full time on Bobby Chat. That was
Oh,
making a
yeah.
small profit when I abandoned it, and I had plans to scale it up, and I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I didn't get to that point of scaling because, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, I had Bobby Chat, and I was like, I can't do the two things at once.
Yeah.
And now I think it's going to be used for doctor education, basically.
Yeah.
So what I'm finding is I'm getting a lot of activity in my DMs. My Instagram account now is getting a lot of traction from doctors and other healthcare professionals, me talking about this journey that I'm going on after the startup of leaving clinical medicine. And there's so much need out there. So many people are disillusioned with working in medicine, and also thinking quite cleverly and being very savvy, realizing that actually their job, it's not going to get them the financial freedom that they want as well, and looking for ways of firstly diversifying their career so that they get career satisfaction and longevity, but also about making more money so that they've got financial flexibility and freedom in whatever way that means for them. And so I'm getting a lot of signals from that. So I'm going to be creating content and packages and all of this sort of stuff. Yeah. I'm starting to offer one-to-one support for people who are going through this journey as well, possibly some coaching as well. So yeah, it's a company that I think, I mean, I even had a conversation with my accountant when I was working for Bobby Chat, and he was like, "Oh, do we mothball this company?" I was like, "Yeah, we probably will do it." But now obviously Bobby Chat hasn't worked out, so I'm back to using that one. But that's
is amazing. I mean, you've got like a wrapper you can use to do is a wrapper for whatever you're working on at the moment. I like the way you branded your experience. You're not sort of like saying I'm the expert that's transitioning from medicine. You're like, I'm going on a journey. And boy, we do like a journey. We like to follow people on a journey. We like to follow people, see what they're doing. So I'm signing up for that journey as well. I'm saying like, what's Claire going to do? I'm following her journey, and we're all rooting for you, whatever you decide to do. I'm sure lots of people just are in this space as well. It's funny, I talk about personal finance, but I get invited more on podcasts to talk about how doctors can sort of have side hustles on a portfolio career. And at some point, I'm like, this is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about personal finance, but there's clearly a need there. And the last podcast I was invited to, the question was about how to build a portfolio career, how to build alternative income. So I think you're quite in how do you say, not your resonance. I'm looking for the word. You're in tandem with your audience. You're going in the right direction, and I'm quite interested to see how that goes. Right.
Yeah, so I'm excited too. Yes. Great question. I don't know, but that doesn't mean that I'm not being strategic and I'm not being very, everything is planned at the moment. So I've got maybe 2 or 3 months of not needing to worry too much about the money that's coming in. But at the moment, I'm getting an income mostly from a combination of freelance work, so doing corporate work, presentations, all of that sort of stuff, plus a few contracts that I'm currently negotiating that would be bringing burnout education to various different platforms, doing some content creation for that. And I'm also going to be creating some digital products and also supporting some doctors whilst I job hunt. Whether or not I end up taking a job, I think it would have to be a job that really ticks a lot of boxes for me, because I have the founder fire. Like, I want to own a business. I want to have, ideally I would found a startup again, but I need a period of financial security.
You need a cushion. You need a cushion of some sort of finance, and we're not like I know, Claire, you're probably I know you're probably in your 20s or whatever age it is that you decided is your age, but we're not like a bunch of 17-year-olds. I'm not very far away from 40 anymore. I was just teasing about the age thing. So we've got families, we've got responsibilities. You can't just start a new startup. When I was 22, 23, I could start something and get the website up. And if it doesn't work, I didn't need any much money my burn rate was very low, but now I've got to cushion things and make a plan in a way that is obviously responsible for your family. So I get where you're going from, where you're coming from. But my feeling is that there are lots of our founders out there. There are lots of people out there who might benefit from having you either in an advisory capacity or as a CEO or even as in product development because you've
Mm,
had like real life experience and you've also had the startup experience. So
mm.
either way, whichever direction you go, I'm sure it's going to work out well. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about corporate work? Because when you say corporate work, lots of people don't understand what you're saying. I understand because you explained it to me already. So
Yeah.
when you say corporate work as a doctor, exciting. So you can do corporate work. What does that really mean?
Yeah, so basically, what that involves is providing services to big business and
Mm,
corporations. For
mm,
me, what that has primarily meant is delivering webinars and in person presentations on my niche, my subject matter. So,
yeah.
for instance, last month, I did a presentation to a wealth management company on burnout, and there was a lot of discussion that came out with that as well. That was really exciting. Um, I have also delivered, end of last year, I did a talk on imposter syndrome to an American law firm.
Ooh.
These companies are actively looking for people to come in and deliver presentations. Like, these companies will all have budgets set aside
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
well-being, for development of their employees, and all of that sort of stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
I mean, I would say it's fairly labor intensive because you've got to approach these companies yourself, and either negotiate with them directly, or they need to approach you or have some sort of connection on LinkedIn. I've done a couple of conferences. So I was a keynote speaker at an HR conference, and that got me a few
Oh,
leads as
nice.
well. So it's a slow process. Like, it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that has taken me a good kind of 12 months to build up to this point
Scale
where I'm
up.
getting inquiries. Yeah, like a spider's web, kind of like
Let
going
me
out like
pitch you
that.
something.
Yeah.
I like to pitch people business ideas when they come on my podcast. So I try
Mm.
to tell them how they can save money.
Oh yeah.
While you're building, now, I'm not going to tell you how to save money. I'm going to talk about, you obviously got that nailed down. There's so much to discuss, Claire. I can't get into it. I didn't realize you saw as well, which is amazing because I can't sew
Mm.
to save my life. You saw and you do all that. But let me pitch you an idea. So part of why MoneyWise Doctor has come, everything on it is free, and part of why except every now and then do one-on-one, then we charge some money, is because I didn't see that a big opportunity for people to give you a few £100. Meanwhile, when you talk about corporations and businesses, they've got thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
So the idea is this, and I'm sure you've thought about it, is to sort of like the next 12 months, try to sort of like brand and package what you do into a B2B aspect.
Yeah.
So a typical medical company is in a box and then building a system for reach out. So
Mm.
rather than trying to read them one on one, you can get an intern. So sometimes like I have interns, and recently I've got a volunteer, a GP who's coming on board, and they're going to work
Nice.
with me for like 6 to 12 months to learn. So you can get someone to do all the reach outs for you. An
Mm.
intern, you can find the number of companies, and I can help you work. We can work on this by the back. You can find companies that actually sort of like are in your area if you don't want to travel or in London. Get their
Mm.
emails. They might have a podcast or whatever. We can get our blog and then systematically reach out to them. If you reach out to 100, 200, 300, 400, you can figure out what your number hit rate is. If
Mm.
you get that number, is enough to keep you oversubscribed, Claire.
Yeah.
And if you get booked out, and then you just have a simple landing page, you have this is what it is, and get in touch with me. And you can even have someone take those calls for you, not for a fee, but for a percentage of whatever they can negotiate. That way, you're not
Yeah.
spending any money. That can be a nice little sort of income for you in addition to whatever you do. You can build this thing
Yeah.
out in 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's really exciting, actually, because you're absolutely right. These companies have the budget. You
Yeah,
know,
they have the
they
money. If they
really,
want to spend
really
it,
do. Yeah, and you can charge a lot of money for these talks, like a
absolutely, you
lot of money.
can. You can.
Yeah.
You can try in a few. I know you mentioned to me. I don't know whether you're public about what you were paid the last time. And I thought it's very nice money. A GP might not make that money in a whole day, except
Yeah.
they're charging very high. But
Yeah.
then I was saying to you, Claire, that they got it back in. That
Yeah.
they you can charge more, but you were happy to get it obviously because that was a nice income.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? How do you approach pricing yourself for these things, particularly when you're starting out? So
Hmm.
I just spoke to a load of people and said, this is where I've been advised to pitch myself at. What do you think? And I went for the figure that most people were in agreement with. But I could probably,
Makes sense.
I have a very niche expertise. I could probably push it up slightly without a shadow of a doubt. So yeah, I like your idea. Well, send the person that's helping you my way, and they can have a commission.
Yeah, and there are ways around it as well. You can do, like, for instance, if Microsoft or Google were to ask you to do a page. You might go and speak to them for free, but then it becomes a calling card that you can
Yeah.
then use.
Yes.
And then say, I've spoken in Microsoft and Google, and I'm happy to help you and all that. I think that B2B might actually be a bigger opportunity than sort of like helping. Obviously, you can still help doctors who are transitioning, and that can be, we are talking multiple streams of income here.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
haven't shut
Exactly.
down my e-commerce store. I still have my domain. I've got like 50 domains that I control, but I haven't shut any of them down. But I still like work on MONEYWISE. So rather than looking for one big chunk, that could be a nice sort of income for you. And you go and you do 1 hour talk and you get a nice pay. So I'll be interested to know how, if you develop the idea, if you need to flesh it out with me, give me a chat.
Sounds
And
good.
put out, I want an intern or someone to work with me on this, or rather, you can get a closer. It doesn't have to be like a doctor, a closer who their
Yeah.
job is to close stuff. You get inbound leads and they get on the phone, Dr. Claire Ashley is quite busy. We just want to make sure there's the right opportunity for her. What do you think? What's your budget? So you're not pitching an amount, you ask them, what's your budget? And,
Yeah.
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 Well, I
Love
hope
it.
that's useful.
Yeah,
At least
that
that will
is.
make it worth your while, because it's giving me 1 whole hour of your time. And for doctors and entrepreneurs, and an hour of time is sort of like what we have at the beginning. You end up with time for money. So I really value your experience. I value your ideas. I value your time you spend with us. I'm sure that many people are going to find it really valuable as well. So
Thank you.
this is an interesting part. How do we find you? How do we find what you've got to offer? Because I know you have a lot to offer. I know you have bigburnout.co.uk.
Yep.
Where's the best place where people can look for you?
Yep. So I am mostly active on TikTok and Instagram, where my handle is at Dr. Claire
Oh, wow.
Ashhley. I'm also on LinkedIn, Dr. Claire Ashhley. It's very easy to find me on there.
Yeah.
And then, yes, my websites are beatburnout.co.uk. And for corporate inquiries, I have drclaireashley.com.
Right. Excellent. Right. Have you got any final things to share or anything you'd like to talk about? I mean, you don't have to, but if you feel.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that to kind of end on a high, on a positive, is that you mentioned that medics are scared of failure, because if you fail as a medic, the consequences might be huge. It could be that someone dies. It could be that someone suffers harm that they live with for the rest of their lives. And as conscientious practitioners, that's something that sits very hard, and it's very difficult to live with that, right? But when it comes to business and startups, you can't have that attitude. You have to go the opposite way. You have to take risk. You have to accept uncertainty, and you have to learn from failures, because you will fail. And actually, yes, you could say that my startup, it was a massive failure. However, what I've learned from that process, no one died. No one died. And I'm here, and I've learned so much from it, and I'm in a better position now than 6 months ago when I went into it. And if I was to do this again, I would still fail. I would still make mistakes, but I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. And I'd be going into it far more prepared and in a much better position to make it a success. So my take-home advice is, don't be scared of failure, because if you're going down this route, it's inevitable. You can learn from it, and no one's going to die.
Don't be scared of failure. No one died. Just a few angel investors lost a bit of money, and you lost a bit of time. No one died, but angel investors, I've the angel investor, I always understand that you can lose money and it's nothing guaranteed. So that's really a fantastic way to end it. Thank you so much for sharing your time, and I'll put the links in the description. If you want to reach out to Claire, you can see the link to our website and how you can find her on LinkedIn. I thought she was only on. I mean, I've only seen you on LinkedIn. I didn't realize you are much more active on Instagram, apart from your TikTok video. Yeah, so it will all be in the links below, and you can reach out to Claire.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for joining us this week's episode on MONEYWISE.com. As usual, if you've got any questions, or if you wanted to make any contributions, if you liked the episode, if you hated it, I want to hear all about it in the comments below. And of course, if you have any particular videos, or you have any particular guests you'd like for us to bring on board, or any financial topics you'd like for me to address, feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you like to get an email every week from me with tips and ideas about finances and how doctors can make the most of their finances and avoid costly financial mistakes, head over to moneywifedoctor.com and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you very much. Okay, bye bye.